Hey, Miss Williams friends. I'm here to talk to you about some math. So I'm on lesson 26, session 3. It's on page 561. So last week we did a lot of measurements, and we measured by the half an inch, and we measured by a quarter of an inch or 1/4 inches. So this week they're wanting you to display all of your data, which is just a fancy word for your numbers, on a line plot, which we also talked about last week as well. So on page 561, it says, Brian records the length of his earthworms in the table below. Draw a line plot using Brian's measurement data. So the first thing you need to know is you need to know, well, what spots do I need on my line plot? What is going to be the scale? The scale is what is it? What is the amount from one spot to the next? So I call it like jumping from hot lava when you're on a number line. That jump, how big is that jump? That is your scale. We did that back with picture graphs and bar graphs. We had to talk about the scale. So we're back to talking about scale, and that's what each jump represents, the amount that it represents. So the first thing I need to look at is I need to look at my data. All I did was copy down the values from your book. So I have 1 1/2, 2 1/2. Please say them with me if you need to work on how you say your fractions. 1 1/2, 2 1/2, 2, 1 3/4, 1 1/4, 2 1/2, 1 1/2, 2 3/4. So I'm looking for the smallest fraction, which I know is going to be fourths because the number is higher, so the pieces are lower. So your scale on this is going to be 1/4 inches. That means every spot is worth 1 1/4. I'm sorry, not 1 1/4, 1/4 inches. That's your scale as I jump from one to the next. Now I'm going to look and see the smallest number on my scale. 1 1/2, 1 1/4. So E is my lowest. And now I'm going to put that on my number line. So I have 1 1/4. After 1 1/4, if I'm moving by fourths, it's going to be 1 2/4, otherwise known as 1 1/2. I know that 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4. And then after that is 1 3/4. Every time I'm jumping by 1/4. That's my scale. 1 3/4 is now 2. Now it just repeats 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 2 3/4. Well, let's see, do I even have a 2 3/4? Let's see, 1 1/2. So this might be the highest. 1 1 or 2 1 1 2 1 2 3/4. Okay, I do. So awesome. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting some X's on, and each X represents one data point. These are your data points. They're the numbers. So I have 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 data points. That means I need 8 X's on my line plot. So I'm going to cross them off as I go because it's easier for me. I only have 1 1/4, so there goes 1. I'm going to put an 8 there just so I remember I need 8 X's. So that one's done. Next is going to be, as I jump along, 1 1/2. There's 1 and there's 2. So I have 2 of those, so 1, 2, and I'm going to cross that out. Okay, now I'm moving on. Next one would be 1 3/4, 1 3/4, and there's only 1. So let me cross that out, put an X there. Next is 2. There's 1 there. Next comes 2 1/4. There is no 2 1/4. The next one is 2 1/2, and there's 2. 1, 2, 2 1/2, 2 1/2. The last one, this is the highest, give that one a heart, is 2 3/4, and that one gets 1 X. So now I have put all of my numbers on a number line. When you do a number line, you also need to have a title. So remember, when we transferred the data, like this, his measurements of worms, we need to make sure that we do everything that's in it. So the title is going to be earthworm lengths. You just copy everything from that table onto your line plot. Earthworm lengths, awesome. And then it said earthworm A, B, and then length in inches. So we'll put down here length in inches. And normally with data plots, you can just put an X, but let's see if they want us to label those as A and B. No, we're good, but we do know that these are the earthworms. So then we would just have a key over here that says X equals earthworm. Oops, I left out the, here we go. What's that? A little earthworm. Okay, so that is how you make your line plot. Feel free to pause it and copy mine down. You notice I did put on this fancy border. I told Mr. Flam I needed to re-deflamize his board. So the next page, 562, it just talks about everything that we did. So I did exactly what they said. You can use a model number line to help you begin to draw the line plot. The earthworms are measured to the nearest 1/4 inch. So the scale is 1/4 inch. If they had been only halves and there wasn't any fourths, then our scale would be in halves. It would be 1/2 would be the scale. But every time you jump, you are jumping by 1/4, so the scale is 1/4. Model it. You can use models to help you display the data. The table shows how many earthworms there are at each length. Each X stands for one earthworm, and that was my key here. All right, so here where they did the X's, they just did it in a table, so it goes up and down, but you can see they have 8 X's for their earthworms. The next page, connect it. Now you will use the problem from the previous page to help you understand how to display data in a line plot. Complete the scale numbers on the line plot below. Use a scale of 1/4 inch. So I didn't go all the way to 0. I just started at 1 1/4. But here you're gonna do, you're gonna jump. You can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4. That means your denominator is 4. So this is 1/4, 2/4, which is also known as 1/2, 3/4, 1, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, 2. And excuse me, you should always put a 1 in front of it. So I told a friend last week to think of the whole numbers as like a checkpoint. When you get to a certain spot in a video game, it's like, boom, you're there, you did it. So it's 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, 1, 1 1/4, 1 1/2, 1 3/4, 2, 2 1/4, 2 1/2, 2 3/4, 3. So that's a pattern that keeps replaying, just like you saw here. All right, how many earthworms did Brian measure? Well, he measured 8, we knew that. That's the answer for number 2. Number 3, there will be an X on the line plot for each earthworm. If 2 or more earthworms are the same length, the X's will be drawn one above each other, just like I did here. How many X's will be on the line plot? Well, if X is 1 worm and we have 8 worms, you'll have 8 X's. How many worms are 1 1/4 inches long? 1. Draw that many X's above 1 1/4. Done. How many worms are 1 1/2? 2. Draw that number of X's above number 2, or above 1 1/2. Complete the line plot. Done. Explain what each X on the line plot stands for. It stands for 1 worm. All right, that is that. Let's see what the back page says. So the back page says, apply it. This is where you're going to apply the information that you just learned into new problems. Number 9, I'm on page 564. It has this purple ribbon. Number 9, complete the line plot for the ribbon lengths data. Start by choosing a scale and labeling the scale numbers. Give the line plot a title. So you need a title for your line plot. And again, you just pull it out of the table. So I'm going to look at mine. They range, just so I know, they range from, I don't see any 1s or 2s or excuse me, 1s, but I do see a 2, and then it goes through 3, and then it stops at 4.5. So my range would be 2 to 5. And you can see here, they started you out at 2, which is awesome. So it kind of tells you where you need to start. I'll model this on my board. So you need to know where you need to start on your on your line plot, but then you also need to know your scale, like what does each one represent. So I'll erase that and this. And again, feel free to pause the video if you need. If you want, you can work on it while I do. I'll copy it down. As long as you're understanding, that's really what matters the most to me. All right, so ribbon length in inches. So give the line plot a title. So the title is that blue bar right up here. You're literally pulling it out from the title. Remember in class I came by and I crossed it off. It was like, okay, these 3 things are on your bar graph. So we're going to do the same thing. It says ribbon lengths in inches. So you're going to say your title is ribbon lengths. Okay, and then we know they're starting us off at 2. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to do a 2. And then when I look at the numbers, I need to see what they have in common. 3, 2 1/2, 2 1/2, 3 1/2, 4 1/2, 3, 4 1/2, 4 1/2. So the only fraction I'm seeing is 1/2. So that tells me that your scale is going to be 1/2. Every time you move, it's going to be, and I'm going to do this at 5. So I go 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 4 numbers. So I need 3 lines. 1, 2, 3. And I know they're all, so this will be 3. This will be 4. And then I'm going in 1/2 inches. So there's my 1/2, there's my 1/2, and there's my 1/2. First data point is 3, 2, 2 1/2, 2 1/2. This one is 3 1/2, 4 1/2, 3, 4 1/2. I just want to make sure I'm telling you guys the correct information. 4 1/2. So I wrote down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. And let's just check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8. So I know I'm going to have 8 X's. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, well, now that I know where I'm starting and where I'm ending, that's the first step. Second step is what is your scale? So I know that this is 2 1/2. This is halfway between 3 and 4, so it is 3 1/2. Halfway between 4 and 5 is 4 1/2. So every time you jump, you're upping it by 1/2 inches. So I'm going to work my way down, and I'll just start with 3 because I feel like it. Now I have 2 1/2. I know I have another 2 1/2 because I can see it right there. But I have no other 2 1/2s. So I'm going to go to 2 1/2 and put 1, 2 because there's 2 at 2 1/2. 3 1/2. No other 3 1/2s. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed this other 3. So put that there, and then the 3 1/2. Cross it off. 4 1/2, 4 1/2, 4 1/2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So as you can see, I have 8 data points marked on that X. And then down here, I need to label what these numbers mean. And I know this is length in inches. And it's really important that you say that because ribbon in, that's 2 inches long is like that versus 2 feet long, it's like that. So it's really important that you label what those numbers mean. So I just did everything that number 9 is asking for. Number 10, we're going to do the same thing. So feel free to pause this because I'm about to erase it and move on to problem number 10. I'm going to keep the scale there so you guys know exactly what that means. I feel like scale is a hard concept to understand. I could be wrong on that. So now I'm on number 10. There's like a little plant down below. Draw a line plot of the data in the table. Start by choosing a scale and labeling the scale numbers. Give the line plot a title. So that's one of the first things I did, was say, where am I going to start? What are the numbers that are going to be on my number line? I have no clue. You just have a number line. So you need to first figure out where it starts and where it ends. I can see in the blue line my title, plant lengths. Then you need to include your plants and then lengths in inches. So I'm gonna do plant lengths is my title. Plant, this is number 10. Plant lengths. And then the data is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. And X equals one little plant, I guess. But I have 8 data points, so I know I'm going to need 8 X's. So I have 6 1/4, 6 1/2. So I can already tell that I'm going to need at least 1/4 inches as my scale. 5 3/4, 5 more to go. 6 1/2, 6 3/4, 6 1/4, 5 3/4. Just recognize that, I already had that. And 6 1/2. So let's make sure I wrote down 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Awesome. So now what the book said is, it said one of the first things you need to do, I had a lot more to do than you because I'm doing it on here. One of the first things you need to do is figure out the range on your line plot. So I don't see any 1s, I don't see any 2s, 3s, 4s. I do have 5. So I'll start it off here as 5. And I do have 6, and then I don't see any 7s, but I'll make it end at 7. And then halfway through is 6. 5, 6, 7. All right. Now I need to figure out, so that's the first, one of the first steps was labeling the scale numbers. So I labeled my line plot. Now I'm going to have to figure out the scale. What am I going to jump along? 1/4, 1/2, 3/4. So I'm going to make the scale 1/4 inch increments. So with that being said, I'm breaking it into 4 pieces, each hole. So I need 3 lines, 1, 2, 3. So I'm gonna go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And I know this is 5 1/4, 5 1/2, 5 3/4, 6 1/4, 6 1/2, 6 3/4. Remember, 1/2 is equivalent to 2/4, but you want to say 1/2 instead of 2/4. It's a shortcut. All right, now I have my scale. I'm going by 1/4 inches every time. So now I need to start pointing these out on the line plot. So I have 6 1/4. Boom. And actually I can see I have another one here. Boom. Now 6 1/2. One there. One there. Gosh, and one there. Whew. All right, I'm gonna go back to the beginning. 5 3/4. And 5 3/4. And oops, I didn't cross that one. And 6 3/4. So now I need to make sure that I have 8 X's. 2, 4. I'm going to count on 5, 6, 7, and 8. So there you have your line plot for problem number 10. Go ahead and copy it down. Again, you can pause. I'm going to erase and start on page 565, which is the green practice pages. And hopefully this helps you guys. I think it's good. Keep that 1/2 is equal to 2/4. All right, and then I'm going to erase my scale because I don't know what my scale is going to be. So I'm on page 565, and I'm not doing the example. I'm just going to go straight to number 1. It says, Denise measures more candles and records the length in the list. Make a line plot to display the data in the list. Use an X to stand for each candle. Give your line plot a title. So again, you're going to pull your title right from the table. So your title is going to be candle lengths. Candle lengths. That's going to go on those blue dots above your title. All right. Now they've given you your range. You're going from 8 to 10 on the number line. 8, or line plot, I should say. 8 to 10. Halfway through is 9. And then the scale, if I look at the board, is fourths. So it would go 1, 2, 3 lines. 1, 2, 3 lines. 1, 2, 3 lines. 8 and 1/4. 8 and 1/2. 8 and 3/4. 9 and 1/4. 9 and 1/2. 9 and 3/4. So now I need to write down here, this is length in inches. Again, a 2-foot candle is going to be a little bit different than a 2-inch candle. So, all right, so mine looks just like the book. Then what you're going to do is you're going to just mark all of these on there. So I'm going to start in the top row in the left-hand column. So I'm going to do 8 and 1/2, put an X there. 8 and 3/4, 9 and 1/2, 10, 8 and 1/2, 10, 9 and 1/2. So I'm done with that first column and all of those rows. So I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Awesome. So I know there's 7 in this column and there's 7 in this column. And I know that 7 plus 7 or 7 times 2 is 14. So I'm going to have 14 X's, and X equals 1 candle. So now I'm going to do the next row, next column, 9 and 1/2. There's an X there. 10, 8 and 1/2, 10, 8 and 3/4. I should have given more space between my X's and my title, but I was trying to save room. I can't remember if I did 8 and 3/4. I think I did 8 and 1/2 and 10. So now I need to make sure that I have 14 X's because that's how many candles I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. 8 plus 2 is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Awesome. So that is your practice. I don't think I'm going to do the back side because it's pretty much all the same. If you watch these 3 lessons that I did, or these 3 problems, should be more than enough to get you through so you can get through page 566. So I'm hoping this helps. I feel like it's review, maybe not review, but material that you learned at other times and you're using it in a different way. So anyway, I hope that helps. If you have any questions, let me know. You still have 2 more problems to do. You have to do 2 and 3 on page 566. Bye guys, see you later.